Opposition MPs are calling for a spring look at the federal books. A Conservative motion amending the throne speech narrowly passed in the House last night, urging the government to table an economic update before summer. While it's a non-binding motion, Conservatives say the Liberals should follow the will of the majority.
Canadians deserve real fiscal management, not excuses or fact-free talking points. Liberals promised $20 billion in elbows up U.S. tariffs, but later dropped them with no regard to affected Canadian workers or fiscal impacts. Fact. The majority of this chamber voted last night for a spring budget. Fact. On what date would the Liberals face the facts and table a budget for their $500 billion in new spending?
Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada is imposing tariffs that cause maximum impact on the United States, minimum impact on Canada. Fact. On over $60 billion of U.S. exports to Canada. Fact. Raised over $1.7 billion already. Fact, fact, fact.
Melissa Lantsman is the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party, and she joins me now. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you. So MPs last night passed an amendment to the speech from the throne to essentially try and force the government to introduce a fall economic statement or a budget before you guys rise in the House. It was really their first defeat. You know, some of us were caught off guard that they went down on this one. But Stephen McKinnon, the government House Leader, is not really taking this all that seriously, saying today that it was just a non-binding advisory resolution. What do you say to him?
Well, look, I think this is the first indication that you'll see a government that's a lot like the last one in terms of ignoring the will of Parliament. So you have the majority of MPs passing this motion to demand that the government tables a budget, and now you have a government sort of flat out ignoring that. And I think that Canadians deserve that. We haven't had a proper accounting of the books in more than a year. It's a convention to obviously put up a budget in, and frankly, Mark Carney is the guy who said that he had a plan, and instead tabled $500 billion of estimates, which is 8% higher than the 2% cap that he talked about earlier and before tabling that. And I think Canadians deserve to know where that money's spent, how it's spent, and where the government's at.
If it's such a concern, though, why was the language kind of weak, frankly, in the amendment? It was saying, MPs are urging the government to introduce a budget. Why not demand, require, we need to see one?
Parliament's not shade of gray. It's introduce a budget or not. Vote yes or no. There's no gray area in this. So MPs, the majority of which have said to the government, hey, table a budget. They voted for it. Canadians are demanding it by way of Parliament, and I think it's incumbent on this government to respect the will of Parliament. And I think it speaks more to the fact that they can't run a majority government, or they're going to have some problems winning votes, and they can't run this thing as if they have a majority. So I think they got to go back to the drawing board and figure out their parliamentary strategy and what they're going to do, rather than just ignore the will of Parliament.
If they do ignore the will of Parliament, which seems likely, frankly, at this point they are dismissing, as I said, this amendment, how far are you willing to go to push this, to try and force them to actually present something?
Look, we're elected and we're sent there as MPs on behalf of our constituencies, and MPs in that House have demanded that the government, does this thing or that thing. In this case, it's present a budget, and it's not just MPs. It's providing certainty for businesses. It's providing certainty for families. It's providing certainty at a time of great uncertainty. And if you're going to speak in platitudes and say that everything is amazing without a plan to show for it, time's going to run out on you. And I think that's what you're seeing from these guys ignoring the will of Parliament at their first opportunity.
The election was only a month ago. The swearing-in ceremony was, a couple weeks ago. Parliament rises at the end of the month. Their argument is they just don't have enough time to put together a budget, to put together, an economic statement. And that the trade uncertainty with Donald Trump provides a lot of mysterious circumstances. We don't know what could happen.
Look,
is that not a reasonable argument?
I've said this before. You cannot wait for certainty in this country to provide a proper accounting and certainty that businesses need and families need and workers need in this country. Yes, it has been a month for the election, and already They're ignoring the will of Parliament the first chance that they can get. In terms of, do they not have time to put a budget together? Well, they do. We know that convention and historically, a government has been elected and presented a budget 3 months later, in some cases 1 month later. So it's not that it's not possible, it's that they don't want to.
I want to ask you about the First Minister's meeting yesterday. It was a bit of a love-in. I'm not sure how much you saw of it, but premiers left there saying it was one of the best meetings they've ever had with the Prime Minister, that things are quite different than they were under Justin Trudeau. Even Alberta's Danielle Smith seemed to have been pleased with what was discussed with Mark Carney yesterday in Saskatoon. What do you make of what transpired there between the premiers?
Yeah, look, I think it's more a commentary on the last 10 years and who was at the helm and how bad the meetings could have been. I hadn't been in the room for the meetings with Trudeau, but I think this is Mark Carney falling short of his own expectation setting. Like, he came there, he said, I'm going to provide a list. We're going to have a list of shovel-ready projects or however he said. And there's no list and there's no details. And again, to provide certainty for investors to come here and actually start building the projects, to start making plans about building the projects, there's lots of things that you can say. It's not only the projects, it's pronouncements on whether you're going to kill Bill C-69 or the tanker ban, the industrial carbon tax. If this guy is about a plan and he's about certainty, yesterday certainly wasn't it. It was a lot of platitudes and a lot of photo ops.
The premiers didn't really feel that way, though. They didn't have a problem with there being no definitive list. You know, he essentially said, I'm going to take back your suggestions, we'll think on it, and then we'll come up with a solution.
Look, I think you'll get premiers from all kinds of sides on this, but it's his own expectation setting that he's going to fall short on, not anybody else's. He's the one who said that he would have a list, and we didn't get a list, and we didn't get any sort of formal plan. There's only so long that Canadians in a crisis and with the uncertainty that we have are going to stand the platitudes, and I suspect that time will be shorter than you think.
While they debate which projects to put on that list, they are also going to put forward legislation in the House of Commons to essentially streamline this process. Some of the documents we've seen to this point suggest they really do want to speed up the approvals process for major nation-building projects. There's obviously some concerns from Indigenous folks, environmentalists, but what about the Conservatives? Is that something you would be willing to support if that bill is presented before summer? Would you sign on the dotted line?
Yeah, look, before we support any bill, we'd like to see it. But they've already, in principle, of course, we've said that we would support anything that builds a pipeline, north, south, east, or west. More pipelines is better, and frankly, anything that's going to help our situation, making sure that we can, build the Canada to be resilient, stand on our own 2 feet, find different markets for our critical minerals, for our energy. Of course, we would support it, but we're not seeing we're seeing a schism in their own caucus with ministers saying one thing somewhere else, one thing here and another thing there, and I think we're seeing language of veto and we want to know what all of that means.
What about internal trade? Because that's obviously another big thing. One of Mark Carney's signature campaign promises was to knock down internal trade barriers. That legislation could come over the next couple of weeks as well. Chrystia Freeland was musing about having unanimous consent to pass that bill through Parliament.
Again, we haven't seen anything, and this is their expectation setting. The Prime Minister said that we would have, some version of no internal trade barriers by Canada Day, and we haven't seen any legislation. We haven't seen anything more than just talk. We haven't seen a budget. We haven't seen any plans. We haven't seen a list of projects. We haven't seen any meat on the bones of anything. And I think that conversation is going to get pretty tired pretty quickly. Before
I let you go, I want to ask you, too, about this fundraising call we've been reporting on today. And essentially, it's a Conservative campaigner speaking to supporters, kind of raising doubts about the judicial recounts that happened in some ridings in the last election. Do you have any concerns about how that call was handled and
Look,
what those
I have
people
full
are
confidence in Elections Canada to make sure that we have the right people who are working that election or all elections right across the country, and the right people that are elected. We'll continue to have full confidence in Elections Canada, and when it's time, we'll go back to the people to seek a mandate in another election.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much, Melissa Lantsman, Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks.